الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We begin our program with hadith number 307, and we're still discussing the chapter that deals with marriage and everything that goes along it. So who will read the first hadith? Yes, Akhi.
Uqba bin Amir, may Allah be pleased with him, reported Allah's Messenger ﷺ as saying, "The most worthy condition which must be fulfilled is that which makes sexual intercourse lawful." In the narration transmitted by Ibn Muthana, instead of the word condition, it is conditions.
Okay. Now, the conditions mentioned here shows us that in every contract, you can have conditions. And we spoke, if you remember, about these conditions in the hadith of Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, regarding the issue of setting Barira free and having the allegiance to her. We will not go through that again, inshallah, because we've discussed that when we talked about it. However, the Prophet is telling us, alayhi salatu wasalam, that in every contract there are conditions. The most important conditions are those related to marriages, because the bond of marriage is a very strong bond, as mentioned in the Quran. وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. So it is a very strong and hard bond. And that is why haram becomes halal in marriage. With what? With the word of mouth. This woman was haram for me. I cannot look at her. I cannot touch her. I cannot have anything to do with her. But once her father says, "I give you my daughter in marriage," and I say, "I accept," she becomes my wife and I become her garment and she becomes my garment. Everything becomes halal, alhamdulillah. And this is the beauty of marriage in Islam. It's easy, it's not complicated, and it is encouraged upon. However, if there are conditions, they have to be fulfilled. Not because she's your wife, the conditions I made, I can ignore. No, you have to honor these conditions. And the Prophet is warning you, alayhi salatu wasalam, because the most worthy of conditions to be fulfilled are those made in marriages. What kind of conditions? Of course, we've agreed upon the halal conditions before. So any haram condition is not to be honored. And a lot of the halal conditions are not even being honored by some Muslims. So the woman, for example, or her wali, demand a particular dowry, mahar, and the man does not fulfill. I get calls from sisters stating that they married for 10, 15 years, and until date, the husband did not pay them their mahar, their dowry. Of course, the marriage is valid, yet it is forbidden for a man to give a condition and not to fulfill it. Some women make conditions and they have to be honored and fulfilled, such as she demands that she does not live with her in-laws. And this is her rightful condition, even if she does not make a condition, by the way. And I know this goes against the norm of people, especially in the subcontinent and elsewhere. It is normal that when the son marries, he brings his wife to live with his parents. And most of the time, this is haram. Why? Because his brothers are there, and they're not mahram. We spoke about the mahrams earlier. So your brother-in-law is not a mahram, yet they sit in the same house. Some of the sisters complain that she's observing the full hijab, and when she goes to the kitchen to help her mother-in-law in cooking, her brother-in-law comes to help as well. And she told him many times that this is not acceptable. I cannot work in the kitchen with full hijab. I want to help my mother-in-law. And he says yes, and yet he comes. So putting your wife in such a position is haram on you. So even if she doesn't make a condition, if she makes a condition that she gets this amount of money every month as allowance, after marriage you ignore that. This is haram. You have to fulfill the condition and honor it. Likewise, sometimes the husband makes conditions. And he says that my condition is that she was not previously married. And after 5 years or 4 years, he discovered that she married 6 before him and divorced or widowed. And he thought that, what is this? This is not what we've agreed upon. So all of these conditions have to be fulfilled. Do you remember any of the forbidden conditions that must not be made or fulfilled? Anyone? Yes.
If a man is marrying a second wife, so the wife cannot make a condition that first you divorce the first wife and then I will marry you.
Excellent. This we've discussed before. If a woman demands person proposing to her that he divorces his wife, and the Prophet said that she wants to empty her plate, and this is a condition that is forbidden to be done. We move on to the following hadith, hadith number 308. Okay.
Narrated Ibn Umar radiallahu an, Allah's Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade ash-shigar, which means that somebody marries his daughter to somebody else, and the latter marries his daughter to the former without paying meher.
Now, this form of marriage is forbidden. So the compiler of the book is moving specifically in direction where certain marriages are haram. So he went to talk about marriage, then conditions. Now he's talking about the marriage that is forbidden. And in Hadith Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with the man with his father, the Prophet ﷺ forbade the marriage of shigar. And shigar is a marriage where two families marry from each other without giving mahar. So who's the loser? The women in both families. So it's like a person has a friend and he says to his friend, listen, your daughter is in the marrying age and my daughter is in the marrying age. I would like to marry your daughter and you marry my daughter. How is that? And both of them say, okay, that's fine. And they make the wedding. This marriage is invalid. Why? Because the right of the women was jeopardized. Their right was jeopardized. Why? Because they did not receive mahar. Even if the mahar was not true or correct, if they do a trick, they said, okay, here is 10,000. And the man says, okay, here is 10,000 from me. And he takes his 10,000, he gives his 10,000, and it's all in his pocket. And yet the girls did not get anything. Again, this is shigar, this is forbidden. But if the marriage is authentic or correct, I am marrying his sister, and he's marrying my sister, I'm giving a total dowry to the woman, she takes it, and it's hers, it's not for my friend, and my sister also receives a dowry for her own, this is halal. What is not halal is to make such a marriage contract without having any mahar involved, and the right of the women would be jeopardized. Okay, we'll open the floor for questions and see, inshallah, how it goes.
Here in this hadith is the exchanging formula, like you give your sister, I'll give my sister or daughter. So what about in any marriage if the meher is not paid? Means they don't decide meher. So is the nikah valid or invalid?
The scholars all agree. If a woman marries without deciding the mahar, this happens. I see a woman, I talk to her father, and the father says, oh, the sheikh wants to get married. Welcome, welcome. I give you my daughter in marriage. You say, I accept. We make the walima, the party, everything. We go. After a few weeks, she says, where's my mahar? And I said, okay, here's 5 rupees. She says, what is this? 5 rupees. I was thinking of 5 million rupees. 5 million? I can get 10 for 5 million. I can get 100 for 5 million. No, what would happen? Disagreement. So the marriage is correct. The marriage is valid. In this case, what happens? The scholars say that she deserves the equivalent mahar of the likes of her. What does that mean? Meaning that in a town, if you go to marry, for example, in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, the average mahar would be 25,000 riyals. This is what the woman gets. So if someone married his daughter or sister to another without naming the mahar, after a while discussing of what's the mahar to be paid, the marriage was consummated. Khalas, they're man and wife. So they have a dispute, they go to the judge, and the judge would immediately tell them 25,000. Now, if you go to, for example, Cairo, Egypt, maybe the mahar would be half of that, or even quarter of that, depending on the people. If you go to the UK, it would be maybe a little bit less, because they want to get married and they are not so much into finance. If you go to the Far East, maybe it's sky high, because they have to have a party and a reception and a wedding, and they invite 5,000 people. So the expenses are far greater. So I hope this answers your question. Once the marriage is consummated, and if the mahar is not discussed, it is very easy. She is deserving what is normally given to the likes of her. We have a short break. Stay tuned, inshallah, we'll be right back.